frame the conversation. How many of you have heard me speak before? I know a few of you have. So I need to preface this with almost a disclaimer. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm not here to motivate you, to entertain you. I'm here to get us to think about the rich history that we have in chiropractic and how we can align that history with manifesting our future along the lines of our philosophical content and model and the emerging sciences that support it. So if you're a condition-based chiropractor, I will promise you that I will step on your toes. You know that saying over here? I'm going to challenge your thoughts. If you're a philosophically based chiropractor, I'm going to step on your toes too. So nobody is going to leave the next 45 minutes without maybe feeling really uncomfortable about our position in chiropractic, but hopefully with a better sense of how we can move the profession forward collectively together. You see, my life is in the politics, the professional, academic realm. And while each and every one of us can go back to our locales and our practices and have remarkably successful practices as an individual chiropractor, unless we can multiply that and do it collectively as a whole through regions, through countries around the world, the profession of chiropractic will not be strong. Does that make sense to you? So that's what I want to do over the next period of time. And I'm going to frame this by saying, the American Physical Therapy Association just did a study where they asked themselves two questions. They said to themselves, what would the healthcare landscape look like if physical therapy wasn't here? First question. And the second question was, who would replace us if we weren't here? And then they wrote a whole paper on that perspective. I think that's a really important question. And I was wondering what the answer would be if we asked it of ourselves, collectively, as schools, as associations. Where would healthcare be if chiropractic did not exist? And who would replace us if we weren't here? Because the answer to that question is really important for strategically positioning the profession moving forward, wouldn't you agree? And it gets down to a fundamental question I think the profession needs to ask and answer. Here it is. Is chiropractic a separate and distinct healing profession? Or is it a therapeutic modality within a conventional Western allopathic system? Now I'm just asking the question because either one of those may be right. But I'll tell you one thing, approaching the answer to that question comes up with very different strategies, wouldn't you agree, on how you achieve that end? So I'm here to suggest to us that maybe if we reflect on chiropractic and the challenges that we face in the landscape, we may be better to consider and support and reinforce and legislate chiropractic as a separate and distinct healing profession. So you're all chiropractors. What makes chiropractic special? I mean, chiropractic is licensed in the United States, Canada, and many emerging countries around the world as a separate and distinct healing profession. Meaning we have different way of approaching health. What makes you special? What is it about chiropractic that's separate and distinct, that's unique? You got it. Now that's not a rhetorical question. It's us. Well, then my question has to go a little deeper than that. What about us that makes us unique and distinct? Well, it's philosophy. But it's, again, the question goes to, well, if we're natural, right? The natural approach to health, absolutely. We're a hands-on approach to health. In fact, I just spent 3 days at the chiropractic convention and meeting in Dallas, and the uniqueness of the profession was that we're hands-on. I'd sit there, but I don't think so. Drug-free? Right. So again, I'm going to suggest if I pull that table over here and put it up at the front of the room, I could get a chiropractor, a medical doctor, an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, a tune-out body worker, a tween-out body worker. You see where I'm going with it. It's a lot of different types of body workers. And they would bring somebody up to the table, and they would lay them on their side, and they'd bring their knee up like this. They would take their hand, and they'd put it somewhere on their spine. Are you visualizing this? They deliver an external concussive thrust into the spine bone. See that? Okay, so if they all deliver an external concussive thrust into a spine, I would argue that they could all alter the biomechanics of that spinal joint. Would you agree? Yes? If they can all alter the biomechanics of that joint, I'll take that further and say they could alter the stresses acting on the soft tissues that support that joint. Right? If you alter the stresses acting on the soft tissues that support that joint, I'm going to take it further and say you could alter the mechanoreceptors, nociceptive proprioceptors of that joint, and affect the firing threshold of those receptors. With me?
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you could then affect the sensation of pain perceived in someone's brain. With me? Okay, so here's my question. If all those people that came up and did that put thrust into the spine, walk like a duck, quack like a duck, and remove the pain of the joint, the sensation of pain, what makes you so special?
Something missing. It is a why.
The reason why we do it, and I think that's a fundamental takeaway for me. It's not how we do what we do, it's why we do what we do as a profession. Fundamentally different. It allows you to have a distinct status from other healthcare disciplines that allows consumers of healthcare products an alternative choice in how they approach care. Notice I'm not saying the only choice, because the old days we used to be called complementary and alternative care. Remember those days? Which told us exactly what we were. We were complementary to and alternative to. Doesn't mean we're exclusively to, right? So we have a different model of health and causation of disease, right? We have different philosophical assumptions that underlie that model of health and disease, and we have different interventions that allow us to approach people's expression of health than other healthcare professions. So I mentioned that to you because that's a fundamental question that we have, particularly as an emerging association still trying to sort through the legislative issues of your profession, as to which direction, which path do we want to go down in this role? Do we want to have a choice that allows us to not only deal with low back pain and neck pain, but also allow people to have effective whole aspects of this through this unique model? Or do we want to be a condition-based approach, a therapeutic approach for low back pain and neck pain, because that's where the evidence suggests we do flow, right? So that's our question. I'm going to suggest this to us. If we look at the history of chiropractic, we have an opportunity in front of us as a profession that we have never had before. Globally, we are all in the exact same position. We have an opportunity to start to present our model and approach to health that is unique from and different to a consumer who is desperately seeking and starting to understand what it is that they need to take responsibility for their health. COVID was a blessing for that.
Just come.
Right. And when we look back in chiropractic history, I mean, look at it. Early chiropractic acts in Davenport, Iowa. It was all about systemic conditions, right? There's no low back pain or neck pain up there. In fact, they used to have hospitals. The Spears Hospital in Colorado, the hospital in Los Angeles. They had a psychiatric hospital for people coming in to benefit from what chiropractors could offer in the expression of their health. And then somewhere in the 70s, this whole thing kind of shifted away from that model to a pain-based model. And it's funny when you look at what Dee said back in the day. I desire to know why one person was ailing and his associate eating at the same table, working in the same shop, at the same bench was not. Why? What difference was there in these two persons that caused one to have various diseases while to his parasitic state? That's a really profound question, particularly when you think about what we just went through. Wouldn't you agree? BJ, in the future, chiropractic will be valued for its preventative qualities as much as for relieving and adjusting the cause of ailments, while other professions are concerned with changing the environment to suit the weakened body. Chiropractic is concerned with strengthening the body to suit the environment. So, we're 129 years old. Dee's certainly way ahead of his day. And the question has to be asked. We just went through a global pandemic, right? We sat in the rooms next to people who succumb to this disease. And there's not a person in this room who wasn't affected by COVID. Not one of us. And there's not a person in this room who wasn't affected by COVID. Not one of us who wasn't sick or have somebody who was very ill and passed away, right? So the question has to be asked, why can two people sit in a room like this, breathe in the same air, suck it deep down into your lungs, and expel it? Yet one of you will express illness and the other won't. That's a profound question that's becoming really relevant in today's healthcare conversation. You know, I always use the analogy of the Broad Street Well in the Soho district of London, right? So think back to those days with Dr. James Snow, and he's a medical doctor in this community. He notes that people in his subdivisions are all becoming gravely ill with dysentery, and many of them are dying. And through his brilliance of observation, don't get me wrong, it was brilliant, he identified that the people who were drinking water from the Broad Street Well were becoming ill. And through his powers of observation, he identified for the first time ever the bacteria cholera, right? And he took the handle off the Broad Street Well to prevent people from being exposed through watering. And it started the medical industrial complex of epidemiology and this approach to battling pathogens from the outside in by identifying and eradicating diseases. So the question I have for you isn't what he did. The question I have for you, if he'd asked a different healthcare question, and that question would be, why is it that some people who drink water at the Broad Street Well didn't become sick, because plenty did? We'd have a totally different medical model than we do right now. Wouldn't you agree? We'd have a medical model that's looked at the resiliency of the human body, the ability of the body to be exposed to external stressors and be able to adapt to those stressors to be able to express health to its fullest potential. So that's the conversation we kind of have in front of us, and it can be a little daunting because we live in a major medical industrial complex. Wouldn't you agree? But this idea of adaptability is not new. We're hearing it a lot now in the conversation, but if you go back in chiropractic textbooks, it's been there since Stevenson's, right? The adaptability of the body, limitations of adaptation. And then you go into Stevenson's textbook, and you know, the science of life, there's a whole chapter on adaptability. I have a PhD in physiology. I would like to take Guyton's textbook of medical physiology that's about that thick, and I wouldn't rewrite a word of it. I would rearrange it in Stevenson's Science of Life, and you would have a totally different textbook. You would have a textbook that's looking at health from a different perspective. Why is that important to us? I think it's fundamentally important to us as we move forward. I need to know a little bit about my background to know why I'm spending so much time on this. I'm a Canadian, out and about, right, Ben? And there's other Canadians in the room, Stephen. We sit together. So in Canada, I grew up playing hockey, as most Canadians do. And my experience with chiropractic was playing hockey, getting hurt, going to my chiropractor, getting whatever he did to me, going back to hockey, getting hurt, going to my chiropractor. He did that for decades. So when I finally decided to become a chiropractor, I went to a chiropractic school that taught chiropractic according to how I was exposed to chiropractic, which was condition-based care, right? Injury management, what was my chiropractor did. That's what I thought chiropractic was, pain management. And it was pretty very effective, to be honest with you. So I went to a chiropractic college, and I'll say this out loud, who did what they did very, very well. I got a great education. I got exactly what I paid for. So I'm not trying to diss any school. And I went back to my homeland of Canada. We'd opened practices, my chiropractor, my wife's the chiropractor, we had a bunch of clinics. And I remember to this day, on my 36th birthday, 1996, if you do the math, I was walking around our house, and it was snowing, and I came back to my wife when they sat down, and I said to her, I cannot do this anymore. I have to get out of this profession. And it was really an epiphany for us, because we had multiple clinics, a nice house, nice cars, vacations. From anybody from the outside, we had all the accoutrements of success, except it was the most unfulfilling time of my life. Like, all I was doing was stamping beef made
Get him.
How's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 to 4, 1 being 0, 10 being the most house, right? All day long. And it was miserable. And then I had this buddy of mine who said, you need to start coming to some of the seminars that I go to. I think this is 10 years into practice for me. And I started to be exposed in the very first time to speakers like Sigurdsson and Reggie Gold and Fred Warge and those greats who, when I was a student at school, I thought they were certifiably nuts. Right? So then I got into the philosophy of chiropractic, and as this left-brain guy, because I have a PhD in physiology, and I have master's degrees, and I love the science such where I prove it to me. I started getting exposed to really rich philosophical concepts, but not from the perspective of denigration, which we have a lot of, particularly in Europe, right? When you're a philosophical chiropractor, it's like, okay, yeah, above, down, inside out, let the body that made the body, into the body, all those slogans that are used in this world. And they literally changed my life from almost reaching the profession. We did sell everything to start it over. So becoming the president of the largest that's a chiropractic all doing in literally about 22 years. So I sit there and go, how does that happen? And my clinical skills really haven't changed. I can still adjust people and do all that kind of stuff. But the thing that happened is up here, like from what I was doing and to why I was doing what I was focusing on. So Life University has this philosophy, as many of you do, we call it vitalism. But I have to explain what that means. Because if you look it up in the dictionary, it's got a lot of kind of denigrating terms, the death of science type, the death of encephalosome, some all those kinds of things. We defined it as this. It's the recognition that all living systems are inherently self-organizing, self-maintaining, and self-healing. And those living systems have within them the ability to express themselves to their fullest potential, as long as they're free of the earthquakes. That makes sense, Dave? All living systems inherently self-organizing, self-maintaining, and self-healing. They have the ability to express self as long as they're free of interference. What's the biggest living system on the planet? It's a trick question.
And it's the planet as we what? Planet?
The planet. Yeah. It's the birds, the bees, the trees, the river. It's the interconnected thing we call this ecosystem. And that living system of the global planet has the ability to organize itself, to maintain itself, to heal itself, and to flourish as long as it's free of interference. What's the biggest source of interference to the ecosystem? Us. And I always like to be sensitive and empathetic here because that's not necessarily us, it's the industrial complex that we've created to support us, right? If you removed all the insects from the planet would die. If you remove all the people from the planet would flourish. Major example of a vitalistic ecosystem in this interference concept. So what's that mean to you and I? Well, we're each individually living systems, right? And we have within us the ability to organize, maintain, and heal as long as we're free of interference. And as chiropractors, we look to the nervous system as the master controller of the body to be able to coordinate communication between the brain, the body, and the body and the brain. You just had 8 hours on it, card and plug check. I mean, that's what it is. Coordinating communication between the brain, the body, and the brain, right? So we look to how to remove interference to that. But here's my point. Is nutrition important to the body's ability to organize, maintain, and heal itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. You don't get the proper nutritional building blocks in your diet, you're not going to be able to be healthy. And it's different over here, but in the U.S., I got to tell you, when I get off the plane, I mean, you don't see obese people here at all. And you don't see healthy people at all in the U.S. It's totally the opposite because we don't eat food. Arguably, it's so processed that there's no nutritional value. It's almost in the same food group with fasting. It's an edible oil product, and they consume it all day long. What about exercise? Does physical activity affect the body's ability to heal and release? Of course it does. Okay. And Europeans get a hell of a lot more of it than Americans do. We don't get any. In fact, our American athletes don't get any physical activity at all. You know, our sports nerds in the room, ASI, the American Sports Academy of Sports Medicine, 60 minutes, preferably all days of the week. Are we taking exercise out of our children's lives by removing it out of the school system so they can read and do math better? So seriously, an issue for us. What about what goes on between your head? You know, your thoughts. On between your head. You know, your thoughts. Stresses, more importantly, distress. Does distress affect your body's ability to organize and heal itself? Hell yeah, in a massively big way, right? And we've just come through COVID that has created a generation of the most stressed individuals on the planet for young kids. Think about that. Our young kids are experiencing more stress than our grandparents who came through the Great Wars. I sit there and I go, that's a problem. That's a real problem. So all those issues I mentioned, because they obviously can be applied in a biblical concept. But I'm going to suggest to us as chiropractors, or primary, notice I'm saying primary, should be identifying your the nurse system and correcting and removing. I'm not suggesting for a second that chiropractors shouldn't be doing those other things. I'm just suggesting that they shouldn't be doing them at the exclusion of identifying interference and correcting interference or whatever chiropractic technique you can utilize. So why am I saying this to you? Because I'm going to get back to the philosophy thing a little bit. How many of you know chiropractic's major premise?
True.
One life grad knows it?
You was didn't.
Okay, we're just being shy. So chiropractic's major premise. Universal intelligence is in all matter, continually giving it all its properties and actions, thus maintaining it through existence. Okay? Chiropractic, that literally changed my life once I started to read and actually study it, not as Gary about passive. So this thing, chiropractic's major premise. Let's start with this. Is it the truth? Another trick question. Let me answer it for you. No, it's not the truth. It's not called chiropractic's truth. It's called chiropractic's major premise. It's a premise. You can live your life as if it were the truth, but to suggest that it is the truth is not very philosophical. So this idea of chiropractic's major premise, universal intelligence is in all matter. Where is it? It's in all matter, right? Continually giving all, everything, its properties and actions. You with me on that? It's pretty straightforward. So this universal intelligence is everywhere, gives all the properties and actions, and is in every system. With me? Okay, so let's talk about universal intelligence, because this gets really confusing. Is universal intelligence a different intelligence? I mean, are there two intelligences? Yeah. Right? Because if universal intelligence is in all things and everywhere doing all things, then what's this thing called universal? This universal intelligence is the expression of universal intelligence within a living thing. You with me on that? So innate intelligence that we talk about is inborn ability, is the expression of this higher universal intelligence within living things. So you have innate intelligence, the chair doesn't. With me? So why am I spending any time on this? Because if you don't recognize this safety pin cycle from Stevenson's textbook, it's an important one. We spend a lot of time in chiropractic philosophical conversations talking about universal intelligence and innate intelligence. Wouldn't you agree? And Dr. Eric Russell, a great philosophy instructor, came up with this above the line, below the line conversation. So you can see a red line through there, because above the line, you're talking about physically, and below the line, you're talking body, brain is body. You're talking physiology. So that's important because it's a great conversation, but universal or innate intelligence, principle 22, is 100% of innate intelligence in every living thing, and it's proportional and requisite to its needs. So how much innate intelligence is in your body? 100%. It's not like it's 95%. You can make it 100%. See what I'm saying? It's not like it's 82 when you can do something that makes it better. It's 100%, and whatever your body needs, it's already there. So my point is this. You, as a chiropractor, cannot affect universal intelligence or innate intelligence, period, end of story. And we spend a lot of time talking about these things in professional conversations. So why is that important to me? Because when we have a below-the-line conversation, we're getting out of the metaphysical stuff, which, by the way, is very academic, very researchable. It's not that it's bad, but there's nothing you as a practitioner can do to affect it because it's just there. And when you get to the below the line, this is where we're having a physiological conversation. See what I mean? Physiology is the window to innate intelligence. Physiology is the window to innate intelligence. I mentioned that because we're now having a conversation about what's measurable, right? It's why doctors like Chiropratici, those that people used to have their patients pee in cups so that they can see how well their body is adapting whatever they're measuring in those cups to chiropractic care. That's an important concept for us moving forward because you see right now in the healthcare literature, there's this word called autopoiesis. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Yeah, so take a second to read that word. Autopoiesis, the property of a living system such as a bacterial cell, a really small living system, or a multicellular organism that allows it to maintain and renew itself by regulating its composition and conserving its boundaries. I don't know, it sounds pretty chiropractic to me, doesn't it? All living systems are inherently self-organizing, self-maintaining, and self-healing, and have within the ability to express themselves as long as they're free of interference. Do you know what other words being used in medical literature right now? Systemic intelligence. Intelligence of the system. It's being used in the exact same way that we use an innate intelligence, except we're running away from these terms, which is potentially fine because there's other terms we could be using that other people would accept. And while it's rich for us, it's kind of deflating our conversation, and we could start to adapt if there's some knowledge. The 33 principles are also something I hear. You can't, chiropractic is a deductive science, meaning from a broad generality, the major premise, down to a meaningful specificity, right? Universal intelligence, broad generality. So you can't research this. And I'm going to sit there and say, that's an intellectual topic. Total intellectual topic. Because inductive and deductive reasoning are not mutually exclusively best, right? This is what I mean. Let's start with a major premise. All human beings have hearts. Who's with me on that one? Pretty good major premise? Yeah. Can you pull out your Google machines and reference the randomized clinical trial that supports the fact that all human beings have hearts? No, of course not. It's a stupid question. But it's a great major premise, okay? All human beings have hearts. Hearts are muscular pumps. These pumps are filled with blood that when they beat, they send fluids through tubules in the body. Those tubules go to all regions of the body, and some of them go close to surfaces. So, if the heart is a muscle, the muscle pumps, circulates blood through tubules. You see how I'm going from a broad generality down to a meaningful specific? If that's the case, then I should be able to find one of these tubules and test my premise by seeing if there's blood pumping. Okay, good. It's a good day for you. I can feel that. Here's where the power comes. Guess what? It's a good day for you too. You get the point, right? That's the way you test that. But I can do that inductively and deductively too. I could just take that syllogism backwards from down at the arm and work it all the way back from the tubules to a pumping part that we call a heart. Equally as testable. But we have this idea that chiropractic philosophy can't be testable. Resiliency is the conversation of the day. Resiliency. We talk about this adaptive ability of the body to respond to external stressors, right? COVID is an external stressor, but there's lots of them. And the ability of the body to adapt to that is what the human calls resilience. It's a major conversation in the healthcare landscape right now. This idea that resiliency represents the ability to overcome internal and external adversity, restoring a state of optimal performance. I love that because that's not our language. But it sounds like the adaptability issues from Stevenson's textbook, doesn't it? So we have this rich history of chiropractic philosophy that we seem to be running away from in context of being able to get reimbursed for low back pain and neck pain. And by the way, low back pain in the U.S., I don't know what it is here, is a $180 billion problem. There isn't a person who hasn't been touched by low back pain. And here's the beauty of it. Chiropractors do it really well. Really well. David Eisenberg at Columbia University in 1992 said, back in 1992, there's boatloads of evidence to suggest that chiropractic is efficacious and safe for low back pain, chronic back pain, and low back pain, right? But what problem is this? Is that all we have to offer? So that's the question we have in front of us. Is that all we have to offer? Which is great. You can have a great living going that way. Don't get me. Is that all we have to offer? Which is great. You can have a great living going that way. Don't get me wrong. But as a profession, if you weren't here, who would replace you? Get back to my original concept. What would the healthcare landscape look like if chiropractors weren't here? And who would replace you? I gotta tell you, what I see in chiropractic, there's a lot of people that could replace us. A lot of people. You start getting into the therapy territory overlap that we just kind of went through with nutrition and exercise and all the stuff that we do to provide a health approach that we can get reimbursed for, that as a profession in an office, I can be successful. But when you're talking literally about the survival of a profession, this idea of therapeutic territory and uniqueness in their care becomes really important in a reimbursable world. So how do you create value in chiropractic? That's it, right? You create values for your service. Wouldn't you agree? We've all stayed at nice hotels. You can go to the Waldorfs, and if you have that type of experience in New York City, you kind of go, holy smokes, yeah, I'll pay $2,500 a night for that, right? The memorable experience. It's also, you know what you're going to get. That's part of the experience for service, right? The consistency of the experience. Hey, does McDonald's sell 20 billion hamburgers around the world because McDonald's has the juiciest, most delectable hamburgers on the face of the planet? Hell no. Most of us don't even like McDonald's. We go there because we know what we're going to get, right? You go to McDonald's around the corner here, and you're going to get 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, and pickle, fun, sesame seed bun every time, everywhere, regardless of where you are. Consistency of service. How else can you create value? Here's where it gets really interesting. Price point. Price point. There's a book written called Price Wars in the U.S. that literally calls that a race to the bottom. Because, you know, we've had, and you have big box stores over here, Home Depots and things where you conduct. Yeah, so the price war piece, competing on the price of, chiropractic clinics, low price of entry, low adjustments, is not the way to survive a profession, because big organizations, big chains will come through and put you out of business, right? That's why we in the United States don't have small hardware stores anymore, because they were all put out of business by big box stores. So here's where it gets really interesting. The third way to create value is through the distinctiveness of your cares. Think about that. The distinctiveness of your cares. There's a book written by Jeffrey Hall, Doug Hall and Jeffrey Stamp. It's several years old now, but they had a line in it that says, the success of a product or a profession is directly proportional to the magnitude of its meaningful difference. Think about that. Is directly proportional to the magnitude of its meaningful difference. So what's chiropractic's meaningful difference, and what is the magnitude of difference from other services? Who would replace us? Again, my challenge is, if we go down this route, I would suggest a lot of people could replace us. All those people who moved bones in my first conversation could potentially replace us. Everybody who's doing ancillary services in their office similar to us could potentially replace us. But if we're doing a unique service that has a distinct model of health, and we have a unified purpose around why we're doing what we're doing, to identify and remove interference in the nervous system so the brain can communicate with the body and the body can communicate with the brain, that is different than other healthcare services. That's why I really get back to the idea that we can do these other aspects of healthcare, but not at the expense of the primary uniqueness of the profession. And I know there's a lot of chiropractors that may not even analyze this find, and may have people come to their office and provide ancillary services without checking its spine or adjusting it. And we just say that's okay for you, but it doesn't develop a uniqueness of a profession. I'm mentioning it to you because this is where I'm stepping on our toes. We have to get our hands around this collectively as a profession. Why is it important? We have the opportunity right now, Life University, we've been involved with the World Health Organization and an NGO in the World Health Organization called the Alliance for Health Promotion. And through the work of Dr. Downs and others, Life University is now the U.S. Office of Representation for this NGO in the U.S. And they have this, they're called determinants of health. And in this determinant of health, what I want you to notice in this picture here is that yellow one, that little piece of pie at the very top. Because believe me, they're still talking about droughts and all the traditional public health initiatives. And I look at that very top one and it talks about Constitution of the Host. And I'm going, man, we should own this piece of the pie. Right from when chiropractic was founded, D.D. Palmer to BJ, this is what they were talking about. So our obligation as a profession is to coalesce around our associations to be able to manage a message moving forward so that we can fulfill the future of chiropractic. I know it's very tenuous here, but it's equally as tenuous in the United States. If we can't collectively figure out what it is we do why we do it, there's not going to be much of a future for chiropractic. Part of this gets in a sclerogenic model health as well. You familiar with this word, sclerogenesis? How many have heard this word before? Good, bunch of, that's better than a lot of the U.S. populations. It's the model of health that we're talking about, right? It's this idea that pathogenic health, positive psychology. Look, we have programs in positive psychology. We don't train people how to be clinical psychologists that have diagnosed schizophrenia and mental health issues. We train people how to have their minds working positive instead of negatively or stressed because they perform better. Now, if you look at mental health as opposed to mental illness, Emory University has this guy by the name of Corey Keyes, and all he does is look at the markers for mental health and mental flourishing because they're very different than people who have mental illness. And you focus on ways to create those in somebody's life as opposed to chasing the pathogenic model over here. It's a very different way of looking at health, and it's something that we all have the possibility to do. We start to address the body's adaptive ability to express health to its fullest potential. Instead of chasing back pain 1 to 10, how's the sensation feel? That's chiropractic's opportunity right there. We had a conversation last night at dinner. You notice I haven't talked about subluxation at all, right? I'm talking about the body's ability to communicate between the head and the brain, the body, and the body and the brain. But this idea of subluxation is so important to us if we'll actually start to look at it from emerging science. You know, Dr. Wenbaum's in the room with the ACC, the Rubicon group, came up with a definition of subluxation back in 2017. I'm not putting this up there for you to run away and start saying this is it. But the purpose behind this subluxation was this definition was to define subluxation in a way that was somewhat measurable. They recognize the first part of it being very similar to early definitions, such as psychological nervous system involving joints such as vertebral motion segment, resulting in ongoing maladaptive neuroplastic changes that interfere with the central nervous system's ability to self-regulate, self-organize, adapt, repair, and heal. Here's why this is important. You can say that to a chiropractor, by the way. This isn't the elevator speech that you use with a patient. But if you say this to chiropractors can't agree on this, but you can put this in a room full of a bunch of neuroscientists and they would go, okay, yeah, I did that, let's research that. Why the hell can they do it and we can't? That's our challenge moving forward, is to start to take the emerging sciences and at least build a model based on our philosophy that's testable and then go from there. It's a really powerful concept that at Life University, we looked at the role of chiropractic as optimizing nervous system function. Think about it, you just had 8 hours. Dr. Adam talking about how to optimize nervous system function. That's our role. Did he talk about technique necessarily? He goes, no, this is what we do. How do you do it? And what technique do you want to use? I don't care. Just one thing, be really darn good at it. Be as good as you can be with whatever technique you're using, because our jobs are optimized nervous system function. And if we're going to allow the body to communicate properly, then it doesn't matter what state of condition somebody comes in, they'll benefit from it. They can be sick and have infirmity, right? They'll benefit from it. Optimizing nervous system function will allow you to provide care to people who are otherwise healthy. And the really good part is that you're now able to provide, input and affect people to express whole new levels of health that they've never experienced before. Think about the role of chiropractic care in a high-performance athlete. What can we do for them? We can do a lot. It's just not a little back thing skip through. So we have to start looking at what we do from a very different perspective. Why is this important? Well, I'm going to use some U.S. statistics for us. The United States of America is the sickest population on the face of the planet. Did you know that? And that's not a global influence. The U.S. population is the sickest population on the face of the planet. You could take your globe sitting on your desk and you could spin it and you could throw a dart at it. It doesn't matter where it lands. Some developing country, Botswana, doesn't matter. Our population is sick. I sit there and I say, how could that be? The U.S. spends more on healthcare than any industrialized nation. In fact, we spend 6 times more than the next nations combined. Despite spending more on healthcare than any industrialized nation, we rank in the lowest quartile. But infant mortality rates, major indicator of health in society. How's that constant? The greatest technology in the world, the greatest advancements that everybody covets and wants, yet we can't have children born better than Botswana. And maternal mortality rates are now some of the lowest amongst industrialized nations. So you're not talking children anymore, you're talking about the mother having a baby. And if you're a black woman in the United States of America having a baby, those odds go up even more because of healthcare disparities and access, and all of the issues that go into the family health. That's shocking to you. Right now, every 15 minutes, a child is born suffering the debilitating and often fatal effects of near-gene syndrome. Through no fault of their mother, they're born to a substance or to a mother. And they often have debilitating and often fatal effects. The U.S. makes up 5% of the world's population, and we consume 70% of the world's pharmaceuticals. Shocking, isn't it? And I sit there and I say, well, why is that? And in our part of the world, their business plan is the same for you folks, is that they have essentially deliberately symptomatized, pathologized the entire human experience to every itch, scratch, leaky eyelid, whatever the symptom is, for the singular purpose of selling us more drugs. And people always go, oh no, that's some conspiracy theory thing. I'm going, no, it's not. It's a deliberate business strategy that is being unrolled right in front of our eyes for over 20 years. And it's literally killing our children. The U.S. lives in the midst of the single biggest drug addiction epidemic in U.S. history, with opioids, killing more people under the age of 50 than car accidents, cancer, and the height of the AIDS epidemic. There's a real problem in the health model of consumers. We've been enculturated into this way of thinking that you can only get health from the outside in. Wouldn't you agree? You have it here. Headache, take a Tylenol, whatever your anti-headache medication is. You have an upset stomach, take something to make the stomach feel better. And it's so counter to the vitalistic philosophy model, wouldn't you agree? We have these things called fish fries in the south, down in southern Georgia. Does anybody know what a fish fry is? Do you have here? They grab fish, usually in the middle of July at a church somewhere. It's about 40 degrees Celsius and really humid. And they'll fry fish in batter and they'll serve it to. And if you ever have a piece of fish that's bad, you're going to go home to your house and you're going to start to not feel too good down here. You had that experience? and then you're going to start to break out in a little bit of sweat. And then it continues on and your body's not able to adapt, and you're going to start to feel really nauseous to the point where you may end up lying on that nice cold bursting bathroom floor with your arms wrapped around the toilet, and you'll be expressing that, to be vomiting. Does anybody have that experience? No, not here, right? You can get it from a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be fish. But what we do back home and what we do here is this. As soon as you start to get that sensation, you're going to take a medication to subside that medication. You're going to take a medication to break the fever, right? You're going to take a medication to prevent you from throwing up. And I sit there and I go, well, I would argue that that doesn't feel very good. Don't get me wrong. But is your body sick, or is your body expressing health the way it was designed to do? Your body is expressing health. Your body is actually designed to recognize that something that shouldn't be there is there. And through reverse peristalsis of the smooth muscles, it's going to start to try and move that thing around. And then if that doesn't work, it's going to turn the thermostat up on your body to start to bake that thing in there, so hopefully the heat would kill it. And if that doesn't work, then your body's going to say, okay, let's get this thing out of here. And it's going to take those fluid muscles and that reverse peristaltic pressure, and it's just going to freeze those pipes, and that stuff is going to come flying out of your body. See what I'm saying? Yet we're in a culture that totally works the opposite to that. And we have to break that idea to allow people to know that your body has within it the ability to adapt to these external stressors, to be able to maintain and heal itself, to express itself fully. When you start to subside with that, then we have a problem. So let me give you a really tangible example of this, and this is step on feet, including my own university student. Let's talk about vaccinations. I love this for gosh, as a PhD in physiology, I cannot stand in front of anybody and say that a vaccine, not plural, singular, that it is well designed, well tested, well manufactured, does not induce the immune response. Because it does. Okay? So, as chiropractors during this COVID thing, politics society, I think we've been chasing the wrong tail, like the dog chasing the wrong tail. Our issue shouldn't be necessarily about the vaccines. First of all, what does chiropractic philosophy say about vaccines? Nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong, D.D. Palmer and others wrote about it, but D.D. Palmer, the green books are not chiropractic philosophy. They are an interpretation of philosophy that is contained within the person. Chiropractic philosophy says nothing. What it does say is this: whatever the exposure is, the toxin that is coming into your body, you are better off being adjusted to allow the brain to communicate with the body and blood to communicate with the brain to adapt to those toxins than you are not being adjusted. See what I'm saying? And that is a difficult one for us to adapt with on that level. Look, people make decisions in their lives for a lot of variety of reasons. And your opinion is your opinion, and I'm not too sure you have the right to impose it on another person, but you can, if they've chosen for whatever reason in their personal beliefs to get a vaccination, try and get any chiropractic care. It just did better off with an adjustment than without an adjustment, so the body can adapt. Now, here's where chiropractic, I can tell you're all uncomfortable. This is where chiropractic should be chasing. The ideology, right? That vaccinations, multiple vaccinations, should be provided to children for a way of preventing health. See, and that's what it is. It's an ideology. It's a perspective that says, hey, if one works, then a whole bunch of them have to work, to the point where in the U.S., our kids are getting 73 injections and inoculations before they're teenagers. That is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane, and it doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny at all. So as a chiropractic profession and community who is embracing a solution model of health that allows choice, we should be arguing with the model, not the concept. See what I'm saying? And that's an important one for us to be able to say. I loved last night when we took this picture. It was so great to see so many of these people again. It was wonderful to see JP yesterday as well. You know, the battle's been going on here for 50 years. A very young association. It's a very young profession in this part of the world. And it takes a lot of people who are committed to a way of looking at health to be able to persevere through the barriers that are put in front of them. And this group of individuals who are recognized here at the Italian Association should be commended for that. We celebrated our 50th. I'll end with this quote that I really like by James Allen from the book As a Man Thinketh. He said, "The greatest accomplishment is for a moment of dream. Mighty oak rests in the acorn, bird sleeps in the egg, and in the greatest vision of the spirit, awaking angel stirs, because a dream is the signal for reality." I love that part. A dream is a signal for reality. You know, this picture represents a dream. People who came with an idea of planting the seed to be able to provide a different way of providing health to the community, to Italy, to Madeira. And we're just so delighted that you're a part of the association supporting that dream and are all committed to being able to go out and plant seeds to not only dimensionally affect every aspect of everything that you know, but the lives of every single person that you have the opportunity to come in contact with. So I appreciate the invitation to be with you once again here in Italy. Thanks for your attention at the end of the long day, and we'll see you all at dinner.